Exactly.
I need the coaches to, wrap it up. Focus, you're good.
I put your mouse. That's fine. Good luck, Ethan. Good luck.
As long as you don't communicate. Alright, so we're ready to begin. What? No, we're not. The kid just left, otherwise everybody's. She would. Pink vans, once she gets back.
if y'all need some time to fix it, that's fine.
It's just like I'm going to. Who's there? Yeah, no, you guys also want to see? Did it go to your spam? Says you're on there. Because I just the same email from. I'm sorry, I'm getting this restart. It's just like it keeps going like in and out, and I don't know what's happening. Corey, do you want me to like resend it, or did you get it? I don't know.
Yes.
We should. I don't know my phone. Email's laptop is over. I'm so sorry. It's just like loading. Okay, no, we're good. Sorry. Yeah, everyone's good, right? Everyone walking? Plan the United States federal government to determine that standards incorporated into law should be protected by copyright. Advantage 20 standards. Broker states to rule that standard development organizations that were incorporated into law are not merely published for public access was proved transformative. This prevented from being able to get money off licensing fees. Number 23. Standards that are incorporated into law of fair use. The court did not hold the standards for free copyright protection. Identify the policy justifications for free public access law and look members for original standards provided best practices for issues and problems. Be familiar with the laws, know what they should bring. Second fair use factor direct support to nature. That just means the ability for global standard development organizations to license their copyright. Article 24. The court's role in harm domestic and foreign SEOs preserving protection of funds the development of standards that convey the benefits of remuneration, licensing, sustained standardization, availability, defense on revenue. SEOs raised from selling works to commercial users. This creates financial harms for certain organizations which cause them to collapse. Right now, Article 23. Court concluded that TOC incorporated law should provide for public SDGs rely on copyright licensing fees to fund activities major drive force behind membership to make consideration of revenue. Public access versions are not published in corporate nature with the organization can influence adoption of reliable standards. This reduces incentive for organization participants to invest in development of standards that can lose control over creation of required under law regulation and that compared in the field further fields future litigation which continues to cover rights of SDOs. Article 24. Government protected for IDC the ability to generate revenue and enables SDOs to sustain creation and updating standard incorporated by laws for use and non-approved additional office may follow this trend submitted in the court's fair use analysis extend beyond ACM and commercial expedition standards for use and terms extended on other standards that is non-incorporated expansion for use analysis additional exception incorporated all standards and standards will not be updated at all and government standards are essential to keep SDOs broadly alive. Number 19. These standards make money the most accessible as well as the federal agency standards will incorporate environmental usefulness and advancement acceptance. Generates local revenue standard develop more broadly, eliminating the SEC's ability to rely on revenue and have ripple effects on the entire standardization system. And standards are essential to create clear international law, facilitating smoother international trade. And page 24. Standards are well known for quality, role, global change, legally important, plus several key roles, use of common language, and take that occur standards that provide certainty, rules and regulations which allow companies to allocate resources against these standards are developed with advocates and can provide international competitive effectively, compete global marketplace standards, data adoption, and clear international is crucial about nuclear war, eco-collapse, AI, and biotechnology, extinction chain, 21. Allocated letter punctured by function generating to input for the development of separating evidence challenge confronting humanity or nuclear eco-collapse and tech disruption and biotech common is catastrophic consequences and need for global co-op to effectively address them, creating a threat survival of tech will require a new law paragraph and issue that DB will be well reputation calls for compliance. Chapter 18. believe that government standards regard others based on the fact that there is no judiciary no enforcement that compliance with the norm and non-compliance is very rare, which is unfrequent, not have significant cost, numerous courts allow disputes and uphold to observe the law. The most important rule of the ICJWHU on the law of the sea, the UN can impose sanctions, freeze assets, and uphold force allows for enforcement of the states with domestic laws, and independently globalization collapse triggers nuclear war, 1624. Should an enemy have direct consequences of nuclear war, actors are competing U.S.-led order, dissatisfaction of globalization result in increased instability and conflicts between major powers is unimaginable, have underscored fragile geopolitics affecting global food security and injuries from fear, new confrontation and separating global odds that could last, and highlighted U.S. being crucial to the struggle between globalization and Europe, protectionism made the future more complex and could lead to globalization becoming a new trend. Tensions in Europe and the Middle East include escalations and knock-on global cultural multi-lag companies climate change and correlative humanitarian issues emerge following the U.S. Advantage is taking the judiciary is divided on cover for technical standards. Only the act clarifies and creates certainty. Hickey 23. Compared to no definitive consensus on whether standard rate protected or incorporated or whether various permitting publicly available consistent conclusions, broader comparability issues, willing to discuss potential claims, and ASIM accelerated the deterioration of taking clause verse 24. ASIM accelerated pushes the most important decision clause which will finally have been taking clause to give a resolution of long-standing ambiguity, and only clear building solves Hickey 23. Taking clause states the power of property not taken from both use and IBR standards, clause sometimes work between clause to be cautious about incorporation or recent decision under a many a model adopted to become domain where significant concerns are taking clause. We'll discuss the also form of amendment and also form of taking clause minutes to back to the government for the clause based on loss of the copyright and otherwise setting the ACMP stand reverse progress and incorporation by reference based upon verse 118. If incorporation permits free copying and protected work and by digital properties like verse within the code, and about the taking clause and companies history and secrets of taking clause against incorporation of property and copyrights cannot be subject to taking clause with legal minimum of free copying and ability to copyright and the conflicts that guard standing on sovereign immunity that is impossible with a lawsuit against the state with claim against the taking clause like 19. Those who collect sovereign immunity will give such a make copyright tangible copyright also present taking claim power for professional generate billions for those economies to be irreparably harmed and allowing to make competitive intellectual property practices to defend sovereign immunity is key on local competition and life science industry. Check 18. Sovereign immunity extend to IPR proceedings and dismiss this one circumstance immunity applies for anything clear because there is no controlling precedent. The sovereign immunity is over legal question. There's no authority sovereign immunity delay of generics and reduce competitors immunity dismiss challenges, release and inflating prices, litigation costs, increasing committing for no longer evidence that of actions have control harm competition and consumers and specifically any competitive practices justified by sovereign immunity will crush biotechnology development and science leadership. Sphere 19. That's a significant contributor to scientific knowledge. And the intersection of this course and link will capitalizing on sovereign immunity and biotech and life sciences opportunity by the mutually beneficial between entities to disseminate info and benefit society and beneficial biotechnology is necessary to prevent total biosphere collapse extinction. Lorenzo 16. Overpopulated growth, along with unsustainable resources, drive an ecosystem beyond recovery. Immediate 5. Key to tackle this last 26 accelerated deterioration of cycles leading to catastrophic biodiversity case for overfishing, farming, fragmentation, but pressure on earth's major consequences. Realistic security scenario under requires staggering costs of the key large-scale personal property, bioremediation, chemical reactions, well-known sustainable function, large-scale implementation, or pollution into agriculture. This requires major shutdown and advantage dematerialization. So now, but will not solve some back and spread quickly and extensively proliferation of gens repeatedly shows some fact and the environmental problems that affect the whole planet. Technical avenues must by no means become projects to keep on working the earth. Misuse collapse atmosphere, an active role in only extensive catalytic power make a difference. And only the certain U.S. implementation of the plan solves science leadership that prevents extinction. Berkman 18. Science diplomacy operated across the continuum of virtues to resolve common interests and homelessness, sports, economic prosperity, and well-being that will progress as use collaboration creates pathways and can be a ripple effect to goodwill diplomacy manage international spaces as well as effective from healthcare for today's globally integrated growing civilizations confronting rapid transformation. Science diplomacy offers a unique process to build a common future and SU is the foundation for interoperability within the healthcare system. Deal by 21. SU is created common language of healthcare SU is finding consultative solutions to issues that arise in healthcare standards created SU such as with the MMA in the 21st century cares like standards spread a framework for variable systems in healthcare establishing consistent roadmap for healthcare to operate new standards in the right side of the existing standards to develop entirely new ones and standards that can properly regulate valid industry. Hymns 24. So include a common language that enables interoperability between standards. STOs developing coordinate standards over 40 different standards that's creates a new scenario that helps drive adoption of standards by providing implementation to support interoperable health and cover demonstrate the necessity of healthcare interoperability in the next pandemic will only be worse. Green Adult 21. Laboratory testing and rapid identification can be paramount control COVID-19 outbreaks and existing limitations in interoperability is managing both the leverages interventions, COVID highlight childhood documentation, distribution of follow-up and diagnostic physical and expose unfortunate interoperability of them to coordinate and nurture health response and interoperability is exceedingly important, exceedingly lacking solutions depend on the exchange of data through interoperability components, laboratories, vaccine results, create a substantial delays COVID is electronic is demonstrating how interoperability is of enormous importance and new pandemics are historically likely to cause extinction. About 23. Distributed natural and particular pandemics is more global travel and urban density creates opportunities to spread or the human history catastrophic pathogen only can have a smaller portion of the same pathogen can cause global catastrophe. Deepest remote evidence science is with a high probability of extinction from natural pandemics. Pandemics can threaten civilization. They're unbelievable, causing with severe effects to food security, neurological harm, could result in insufficient organ fitness to maintain civilization and could occur and history without leaving a trace. Solvency. Anything coming in the after it's a double layer, even the uncertainty of potential losses destroys all standards. Rose 24. ASTM would be unclear. This would be drive economic harm as SUs become out of date. Potential losses to scourge COs in development or updating which would deprive efficiencies, potential international laws to address STOs in developing industries for standards craft, the Garden Certificate Traditional, MDD license, precise scope, MDD, brand scope, participants, senseless, is no copyright, private property, court holder, trade secrets, this is a litigation, Congress may waive progress, solutions that secure ability of cancer, third regime, result in standards not being developed, role of the public will suffer, and only the act process provides the ability to license laws as STOs to keep innovating, but also provides public domain access, former 19, government can pay for license to provide free access to all incorporated extended be implemented financial incentive best standard. Okay. I'm good for cross then.
Okay. On Advantage 1, you talked about global standard setting organizations. How does the plan impact those?
Yeah, so are you like referring to like the park evidence?
Parks evidence.
Yeah, so basically like it harms domestic like standard setting organizations, and the claim there with the evidence is that like US standard setting organizations or like STOs are basically like licensing and standardization, and that revenue like international STOs depend on that because the US like kind of sets like the precedent for like trade laws like standards that are used in international trade.
So, so you need other countries to model basically the plan standard.
No, that's
No.
not the only argument. We've read evidence how U.S. standards have been successful in terms of things like international law and international trade relations. In other countries, lack of standards creates issues. The fact that if nobody's innovating, we need to make sure that the U.S.
Okay.
is innovating standards to ensure that the users are
That makes sense. What standards does the plan result in? Like what standards that are good do you think
The
plan
app
results in?
doesn't make a claim that we're like creating new standards. We are allowing standard development organizations to gain like the revenue and licensing fees that they're not currently gaining.
Okay.
What is he is like
The-
isolated how there's like a lack of like trade standards international
Okay.
standards.
I want to ask about that. The NFPA evidence on Advantage 1, your internal link to international law, says that standards help companies gain an international competitive edge. Why is that key to international law?
Well, I don't think that's our only internal link evidence we have. If you look at the evidence right below it, the Shea evidence, it talks about how international law is shaped by trade relations. The card above that is our internal link that we are solving for things like trade relations.
Where does this
which are
card
key.
say that you solve for trade relations?
It talks about how we've read evidence, uniqueness evidence that says that right now SEOs are private, they're not being updated, and nobody's innovating them. We've read evidence that says how that will impact trade because standards are key in order for trade systems to work. And we've read
Okay.
evidence that says that when trade is bad, international law fails.
Okay, I want to ask about your Sparrow evidence on Advantage 2. It's tagged as sovereign immunity crushes life sciences. Why are biotech companies scared of states taking their tech, and where do you think in the card it says this?
It's not just states, it's the federal sovereign immunity as well, which is why
Okay, but same question. Why are they scared of the government taking biotech?
because the government sees those as good inventions, takes them, and IE sovereign immunity says the government doesn't have to pay them for it. No one wants to innovate because the government.
Okay, I guess where does this card say that, like, they stop innovating biotech because of sovereign immunity?
Because it's anti-competitive because the government.
Right, I'm asking
sovereign
where your card says it, but that's fine. What system or normal means for the branch of the plan? What branch is normal means of the
We'll
federal?
spec this out.
Okay, what systems become interoperable for a healthcare post-plan?
Yeah, so basically that scenario is contingent on STOs create like tech regulations for things like ventilators, vaccines, all that tech that we saw used in hospitals. Those rely on interoperability created by standards.
1C6, 1C. Oh. Let me know when everyone's good for work. It's just so. Let me know when everyone's ready. We're good?
Give me one sec.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Panel? BVN? Rush? Okay. First off, BVN is counted by the United States Federal Insurance to substantially extend the use of escrow licensing system for standards incorporated into law, ensuring implementation fair priorities for the direct government copyright enforcement, and create a federal administrative tribunal with exclusive authority to adjudicate royalty disputes over standards incorporated into law, and fund and incentivize independent standards developing organizations to create public royalty-free standard alternatives and prohibit federal agencies from mandating the use of copyright standards unless royalty or public alternatives are unavailable, and institute the no economic sense stance and commit to binding copyright arbitration for cross-border licensing disputes involving standard essential copyright technologies, and remember that standards incorporated into law should be protected from copyright. Yet finalized guidance copyright allocating space colonization $1 billion for every non-compliance and integrate artificial intelligence into nuclear command and control if and only if the United States determines that standards incorporated into law should be protected by copyright. Blank 1 solves standards liability and stops IP abuse. Blank 2 solves royalty fairness and reduces sport shopping. Blank 3 solves innovation and standards poorly. Blank 4 solves takings and constitutional violations under Fifth Amendment. Blank 5 solves 1 places and no economic test solves the about indigenous tribes. 6 out the internal link presumption 1 blank 19 all fail. No just agreement to antitrust to deter future contribution that you can assess in the cabinet or companies to contract really the government benefits of void false policy. Blank 6 solves judicial sovereignty erosion and international entity conflict. Also guidance competes and solves 13 course with the USPD stocking deference to adoption guidance less compatibility US video demonstrating capacity influence level by using fact finding and not many rulemaking powers that exercise space call which otherwise stops extinction that's circulated 19 unlike how colonies established human becoming extinct communities renewed no one's not will reassure we can establish revenue core the conversation insurance silver colonizing our solar system spread happiness as if where we on travel geology rockets don't turn the state elevate fuel water develops exploration demand material space elements reduce cost AI integrations impending otherwise stuck in strike guarantees miss stock and race to the bottom extinction that basic to do AI increase risk fairly automated eat up assistant producer resulting malfunction waste tracking confidence second strike AI double power scrutiny cyber technical facility integration computer system and lead to miscalculation escalation increasing unregulated state encouraging competition use and pursue integration as a not trust way to right to the bottom increase the access next off it's the very scumbag the 50 states DC and ruling territories trustee state reference copyright of the grounds of sovereign community solves entirety of bench choose zero reason the app is key next off is campaign 5 years such established 114 obviously was also standard corporate listed and sharp visible based on prior restriction hiding back tech comments bureaucracy saw and tech interfere with spirit curiosity is also good for you and pass on knowledge and culture capitalism causes cascading and systemic risk extinction number 3 human extinction will be driven into the threat and then copyright destruction copyright anybody no go all the way machine conflict we have actions that were 30 in the minority we need socialist to start means movie that have as state of miracle capitalism US and how to create wars and difficult capture skills were some things and research markets break and as breaking law should throw cases it was a state increase profitability for companies it was a new about capitalist that war system and it was a check on to war cost on the negative for war casting and united revolution against capitalist future 3 communists are coming to companies that's more sure it's really conscious of the entire generation this way the one way our response to GT will the response to rule communists should people where we will see the second that's to be of the dispatchers point constitution last in number spirit and willingness to the revolution or not in other course that she can be fatal with company capitalist and willingness to find it out slowly from the last sustainable the way revolution capitalist the largest energy revolution which is not the most security offering wars nations which is through the capital revolution eruption republic realizing how the US become democratic economies and super runs through our agency next off reduction requires safeguard creation against all produces shower fee therefore at core IP branch for speaking of greater safeguard creation for all other authorized use and expectation this says for every who's had trademark copyright violation 1 STD materials are made public under fair use that's 1 issue openers 2 fair use is authorized as got it question was whether fair use option not authorized and how to fair it was authorized for copyright for the court so it can't be authorized by laws 1 by law there is not infringement copyright fair use as long as use to copyright for negative licensing contracting government mandate efforts the public by directional deletes core IP bad generics including clog and politics and store current core controversy over every acquisition next up is a source money is that rulings to about it destroys judicial legitimacy class rule all sensitivity so about it acceptance and ever system on it basically this is an increase of the errors with issues that's what money products taking back that's what something you heard it's actually money not like the grow for the true parts scores I'm going to relation against the issue for the media hands balance all sorts of makes it around the rule of law classing that causes extinction bullshit true up horrific consequences breaking down the rule of law is there a true okay as zero and world government survive and a true safeguard rights only liberty a country have that revolution over fishing legal mass extinction refugee said members of the international security must be amplification committee rule law the necessary is to be able to ensure anybody true justice will be sitting apply the law without fear next office the ADR accountability is require arbitration for IBD suits related to standard global organization the parties can be held liable for copyright violation narrowing to students to students correction copyright increasing funding with the American Arbitration Association and threatening to prohibit the use of the American Arbitration Association but does not implement copyright protection in standards it's also increase the tradition necessary for arbitration for the of course, you get an opportunity to be like opportunity to opportunity to be on it. But it's not to give me revolution criticism. Opportunity for the media to hard speech creating. I mean, this promote use of opportunity broader use is key to international IB dispute resolution chassis. I'm not sure what international come out. National courts perception one party. They hope to be a force another institution which wants to really correct. Commission to force the party. The arbitration institution like supposed to be that's credible. Not around issues with SCP licensing. Of course, the 70 starts to 6 of our significant substantial organizing. Capacity to change communication office 30 and the arbitration settlement to be beneficial for fast information. The least possible license company will work out to address issues of the 2016 change to COVID-19. Cities address the waiting rally coordination in Florida. Class gas team single class class surgery. Bill set up every class with the neighbor. Right class that borders refugees next city class is one compatible outcome and fairly and nationwide. Classes are ways to go food and access to outcome. And these were like good way French one. One no spill over the evidence is that most standards are government notices that those are incorporated reference which plan isn't to zero in terms of global trade. Trump obviously thumbs. It's also scroll descriptive current standards are sufficient. 3 even the standards fail roar and trade not reverse casual. No. Online back and instead that's likely for 16 I felt with this story in the crazy border multiple Trump. That's the normal business analysis of over here. But the border has to be hard to control global. That's the kind of confident globally. The world's way of 30 action rate. No. What's on the institution rather than originally Queen Law. Measures the congress say I make more citizens on the heart. They would break from legal internationalism. Their cooperation costs about threats against humanity, not against the terminal school property solves. It's a laundry list. Can't solve globalization, border disunification, and other countries don't. That's when you see SOCA inserted. Multilateralism is resilient. UN checks conflict isolation, climate change, and prolific entities. SDOs will be found as closed. Before other popular issues to be posing. 10 for 15 years, and none of the accessory, cultural activity, and the market system over the SDOs requires training materials and programs. Turn the plan destroy standards of running SDOs when clean law. That's what and actually to reform this situation control. The company wants to take this to cover and the constitution requires only that and the law has monopoly distance of equation. Legislation money being to wait for the equation. They were therefore adopted the world of citizenry. Monopoly held by access to law. SDOs will be found as closed. Actually, SDOs are fine both SDM as closed at RCC. Climate issue is that of the law. It is not we have to be standing cover. It may be true. It will not be a reason to ignore hazard or will introduce the cover. Not that important created after we find more certain cover does not protect discretion or they don't touch the SDM and it's at all costs. Go to the bench too. One, they cannot solve all some unique cards about cases other than SDM. The dust aft doesn't affect rights precedent. It's already in yellow. Internal was 0 and cross X 2 or some immunity enable. And the application key also in yellow. 1 C 19. 3 Trump south test. Type 450. Trump will lift that every pushing against million. International University of Castro. Labor standing tech about medical sectors and disease to the right. Power to Trump institution and US also the operator attack. The 80th operator the pass with the percent of the way. Could be a compressed up strategy CD. National reform self critical. Ever Trump to end out of China. Which also hands with South Sudan. Trump will list the possible calculus before the report. Which comes to lock and comes on. Vaccine management for conversing. Kennedy actions expressing authorities. I got to go with FDA for polio vaccine and away. And it's not customary or restriction. Round mission does all code doing. Out of the government declaring the liberation including national goods, money that's over the making disorder, a biggest international goods, was under the liberation direction have good and benefits of those, are unusually distributed choices of complex interaction, the read up bad innovations off for granted policy makers together, innovation in the history direction, take for granted more is better, unsafe justice is better, science, dips, fails, that's takes a lot. Little web 100 useful long time committee such the policy is made over, but value is little demonstrate true or do not send up to the system based on hundred committed rather than Mexico or Guam, who's lacking true progress, especially when it's seldom a magic one to score about a crop, COVID also thumbs, but other countries won't cooperate, China obviously says no, healthcare 0, no card, it says deal integration how it's planned. And China as evidence just that SEOs already integrated which solves the plan or they can't solve plan, can't solve DCC out of the country. Don't think but they don't cause extinction for the drink. Highest fatality will occur by this valley system outside Africa. Unlikely death related to some restrictions wars, things not likely to crashing or passengers have long incubation time sectors in the African story. Much temperature should reach HG, passenger cost 90% fatality is required. Anything that I can ready for cross.
You're good for cross?
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
The ADR counterclaim, what does it do?
What?
The ADR counterclaim, what does it do?
Arrest.
Yeah, it mandates that disputes relating
Wait,
to
could you
the
talk up a
IP.
little bit slower? My microphone's-
Oh yeah, it mandates that disputes relating to the IPF standard development organizations should be adjudicated via arbitration. And
What's
then
arbitration?
yeah, that's
What is that?
It's a private process that is used to litigate disputes.
Does it feel that these are protected?
It doesn't fiat that, rather it like says that it should have.
Wait, it feels though that the infringement cases will be heard.
Yeah. Just in a different form.
So what does it compete off of?
It doesn't do its protection. It also doesn't fiat the outcome.
I mean, it does because the outcome is protected, right?
Not necessarily.
How could it not be protected in the world of counterclaim?
Because it threatens to prohibit use of those arbitration associations if they don't implement the standard.
If they don't implement the standards, and standards organization companies have to go to these private entities in order to be able to.
The disputes go through those private arbitration associations.
Okay.
Okay, status.
Status quo, so it's launch off.
So comment.
Yes. And judge K. Yeah.
Okay, advantage counterclaim claim 3. Do you fiat that these standard development organizations publish public royalty-free standard alternatives?
We would incentivize them via however much money necessary.
So you're just like unlimited spending?
Well, however much spending is necessary, we think it wouldn't cause debt, that would be non-unique, but we think it's sufficient to solve.
But you just unlimited spending?
It's
for
not unlimited, to
For
be
how,
clear.
unlimited for however much it takes?
Well, if I mean, if funding is necessary to solve the app, you want to
Okay,
just solve it.
escrow licensing, expanding the use of escrow licensing, how does that solve for SEO, like SEOs not getting royalties?
SDOs, escrow licensing allows SDOs to gain royalties.
How?
It's a licensing system under the government that monitors how standards are developed, which ensures that they get paid the fair amount. Otherwise, courts also circumvent NAF, so links you just.
Okay, what's the no economic sense test?
It's what 1AC Blake says is necessary to enable contracts and for companies to garner benefits. It's also about indigenous tribes, so you don't solve it so yeah.
Okay, copyright arbitration for cross-border licensing disputes, how does that solve the app?
Because it enables the standards and revenues necessary for companies to develop the technologies that you say is necessary.
Okay, Cap, what's the alternative?
The all normal means to demand an expansion in the scope and speed of movements.
What do you feel?
Well, we think imagining those movements is good, but you get deficits to those movements.
So,
You can read transition more.
Wait, what do you see that?
yeah, what do you feel?
We normal means expanding speed, scope of movement, you get
Does
deficits.
the government join the revolution?
Well, we think they could be.
They could?
Yeah.
Okay. 10 minutes. Stop texting this. advantage 2. T. The cap kit. The waivers counterclaim. The advantage counterclaim. The ADR counterclaim. The sui sponte TA.
Okay, let me get the doc order.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 second. So T cap waivers advantage ADR. I think you're right.
Judges, are you all good? Yes, Spillover, our evidence has said that governmental standards are the ones that are most prominent, and even if SEO companies make the most money out of them, which means that if they're not profiting from those, it will collapse as a whole, which means that the plan is able to solve for them too. They say no internal link to global trade. That's wrong. Obviously, our internal link evidence says that standards are key to trade as a whole, and we've read uniqueness evidence that says that standards are low now, and operability will thump as long as it is. Trump definitely does not thump. If anything, he provides a uniqueness claim for this argument because we saw how the GDP decreased the second he did tariffs, but the Supreme Court checks back at him doing anything further, but that means that it collapses inevitable trade absent the affirmative plan in the first place. Now they say the standards don't play a role based on reverse counsel. That's wrong. Uniqueness evidence above proves that even if the NFPA evidence does not say it there, now no international law impact. That's wrong. Obviously, international law is failing right now because of lack of updated standards, which means that the app is able to revitalize, and that's uniqueness for us in the first place. They say the cooperation card is not about threats against humanity. It does not matter. No, our evidence says that as absent international humanitarian law, then other rogue countries would be able to act in ways that are not being checked about new forms of warfare, like cyber attacks would be done, and no new standards would be updated in order to prevent them from occurring, which means that it would still obviously cause extinction. Yes, we are able to solve globalization. Other countries would follow on to the United States. Our national law evidence also says that they would be met with compliance costs, which is sanctions, which would force them to comply with them in the first state. They say, well, as well, then that's not true. UN is not able to check if there's no standards updated in that, which all of the things in the UN are also standards as well. They say that as soon as we find the policy 24 evidence does not assume the new decreasing effect. The card was written right after the case was overturned, did not assume our long-term standing effects that are happening right now. The turn, that's wrong. First, say, not reading our rubber evidence at the end of the 1AC that says that the government would be able to pay for all the licensing fees, which solves any issues with the monopoly that would happen in the first place. So that answers the below evidence go. And the other July 16 evidence is old and does not assume the case because it happened in 2023. Advantage 2. First, yes, we are definitely able to solve for this urban immunity advantage. It does not assume that the government is taking them right now, even if we overturn the taking clause, which implicitly would fix that in the first place. It was just sovereign immunity definitely is not inevitable. If the Congress rules, if Congress passes a bill that says that they have to abide by this, it would overturn it, which means that there's be no going back. Trump does not definitely have disadvantage just because he's defunding public research. He's not stop private investment, which is our internal links, which is why nobody wants to invest right now because they fear that even if they do invest, they're not going to get their money back. It's not about public funding, but private companies as well. Disease definitely does cause extinction. Our bomb evidence says knock-on effects, which leaves in COVID-19 lets us more helpless than ever. Obviously, standards are definitely able to solve. Bad tech innovation is definitely able to solve because it allows for us to come up with new things to solve for ecological collapse and everything. Time simple. The card is old. Does not assume new innovations and new technology. That's a disease. Also, healthcare obviously cannot solve the standards because that relies on us for and the next 2016 so answered above. Go to C. First, we made textually takes action. Secondly, the functionally plan stops unauthorized use of the government from using standards to counter interpretation. Then the IPR helps in the right to owner. That's Mandela 18 constructed evidence and efforts being or statute contradicting patent. And trademark primarily than whether the strength and IP warranted protection to be concerned for first protection and rights to owner and decision that makes it easier for the acquired IP product. This could provide IP protection to make it easier to provide enforcement of the revenue for first strength and protection. For A, predictability and precision. Mandela uses all Supreme Court cases to take the most specific definition possible for what the case has said. Best intent to define. B is after they check the topic and exclude any affirmative explanations, injunctions, or counter interpretation. Just alter the offense functional limits to each areas core code. IP and IP tax accountable and all check the offense path reasonability competing in terms goes race bottom substance try to okay. Framework way that plans we had implementation and terms against compatible alternative techniques proof unique links appended all should be evaluated scope itself any other interpretation means ability kills predictable class destroys fairness education advocacy kills second capitalism is inevitable capitalist IMF making multiple food secretaries permutation to either all overcomes links or fails liberty flex is growth sustainable strength 20 they said to give compelling measure frequently wrong at the people moving wrong in the middle has also happened there's also capitalism service to the make it in the left and then now highly value we have the way to grow more food to better world use the economy because that's not decreasing we're getting more food it's heat resilience in every climate impact that's right I'm dirty with adaptation I'm predicting that the manufacturers who buy 5% resilient alters or related with growing wealth and is failing poverty organization communication resilience is financial infrastructure sanitation disease irrigation and farming gear, reduce the crop failure, disaster, adaptive variability, oxygen, by development, and a state of climate for more wealth and technology. 6. There is no link to primary evidence cross-apply, no monopolies linked I did above, but even if other instances, episodic failure, and private actor failure voting issue possible for review of everyone's an angel beyond, it's based on bad actors, results in no link, IP is global, and IP is global, the reason why the app makes uniquely worse, second, the all season worse authoritarian takeovers, prints, and qualities, corrupt, decision-making towards public now, which with their searches would occur in a political, economic crisis, the village should about some power that a state emergency, the object for executive power, space, and rights, so different, the future authoritarian, which would also be enforced, and transition to war with failed, and the situation for resilience, and 7, all fails, transition towards assessment, 19, this is not effectively dismantling entire system, never easily with touch of other conflicts, to bring in the fossil fuel, the military force, turning without even conflicts, this guarantee away from capitalism would have been mitigated right back with the choice of earning, enriching climate change, the socialist looking for the all pragmatic, and permutation to the all, if it's open to penalty, it's not listed in the plan, permutation to both, all solves all the links, so it is the plan, all must be functionally less competitive, less than the plan, and not beneficial, which is the plan's inclusion of implementing something you prefer, ideological, competitive, competition, vague, intermediate, and legitimizes plan plus opportunity cost to the plan, which means due to the plan, and abolish all other instances of IP and capitalism, reject all other instances of capitalism, any ideological commitments to that is sufficient to derail all policy, then any remain of capitalism like Trump, good and peace law, partition the plan in all functions, but do not ban the plan. Now the waivers counter plan definitely do not be able to solve an advantage one, which will go for, but also it's not able to overturn a precedent because it's a precedent of the first advantage, but it also fails because the government would still have things under the takings clause and the state sovereign immunity, but again they don't fix that. There's also no self the advocate was a voter making new answers if they do a conditional social voter for competitive equity, attempts to try to do this was definitely all their offense. Now if they renew answers and we get new answers to it later, the advantage counter plan, it fails, partition about permission to the counter plan, and the scroll just gets hacked anyways. Well, that's correct. Another thing close to the cyber against the scroll from the early this year, companies don't want to manipulate the system, and the front of the scroll firms also failed out the pricing limits and knew their cross cut the card. The second place also fails, admin state always fails, that's everything. In 1916, the lawmaking and general policy should have produced that never being able to make broad promises, also the failure result made doing more with things once the entire government enterprise absolutely not anything. Also plan, and if and only if other issues is inserted for reference below, that solves the net benefit because we would never actually have to do that because it would never exist in the capitalism which means actually functioning competitive key to have determinants and flexibility and also the expensive standing and impulse with global adversities caused by the social by the excessive federal spending economic security was and it would go crowd of the increase in the chance by economic downturn the tax rate increase in the harmful effects on growth of Congress made never do country and try to invaluable social alliances spending is reproduced and will occur and there's no thing also no impact to AI because the government would be able to sanction any bad AI could be advantage. Now the advantage counterplan disputes would definitely not solve permutation to the counterplan permutation to the counterplan permutation to both permutation to the counterplan over other issues taxes inserted reference below definitely spot solve. Also SCP tech is high right now. Lena Vaughn just got fired, which means that she has no way to enforce any issues with the thing, which means that they have all the power to be able to innovate. There's impact about smart cities. Obviously, this is from old and does not assume that it would be able to. Does not assume new tech that's been innovated to be able to solve. Now, medicine is not inevitable classes that isn't existential. Not to concentrate 23 that cities surrounded by survey their carbon organization efforts, sexual assistance and enable decarbonization, breaking up the fellowship clean and continuous urbanization and urbanization. Now, to respond to the plaintiffly self-served immunity, actually. Yeah, there's no impact to cities that solves the thing. Now, they also cannot solve the immunity caused by this. And so, Sue Ponce, plain self-served immunity doctrine, and judicial independence of rule of law. And that's why we're turning one. Also, there's no link to the test because we never specified that where the courts will not be. We can also always just be out a test case, which, we always be out to solve. Also, the plain self-served immunity doctrine. That's why you must be self-served immunity pieces to the principle of the sufficiently independent doctrine. It's just that the judiciary and sovereignty of immunity and treated territory areas and tax it. Supreme Court remaining in the statutory opinions whether the oversort of the legal standards around and then the power of resolvement would not be revived. Now also not to be defined. It's unavoidable. And also previous cases stopped on the judges have also spotted in the past it would prove that there's no means also fiance solve normal means test case same as exact Congress has to make beyond non-arbitrary does not change the course apply any other interpretation causes infinite prolife no resolution no norms means pathway. In fact only that is internal change in standards course whenever it's asserting. Now go back up to something actually I'll get back up and AI definitely fails. That's robust when 22 and they're economic training unpredictable as is whenever they're different from training it. And this is similar common sense whenever they're atypical reform about it. They have to have relevant nuclear to think the high confidence in decisions. Can you just set up this girl? That AI defense was on the advantage counterplan. Are you doing that?
Not for you. For cross?
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. Good?
Mhm.
Okay. So I want to start back on Advantage 1. So you say that you solve global standards, international organizations. Trump withdrew from the WHO. He withdrew from multiple international treaties. Presumably, how do you get him to sign back on those or gain the trust of other countries?
Necessarily, we don't need Trump to sign back on them. One,
Like your
if-
cards are about global treaties and country
Okay, if
security.
you
those.
would let me
If
finish
Trump's-
my answer, I would tell
Okay.
you that private standards organizations can be adopted into things like international.
Okay, private standards. Your card's talking about public actors responding to public threats. What about private actors? That may
I
exist?
literally don't know what you're talking about. That
Like
card,
your terminal, but that's fine.
the terminal is different than the solvency mechanism for the app. Our solvency mechanism.
That looks like the lack of enrollment. Let's go to Cap.
No.
Okay, I want to talk about the Nordhaus evidence. The students from the Breakthrough Institute, this organization spent billions
Wait, sorry,
lobbying
what
for
evidence?
big oil.
Sorry.
Like, why is that a qualified piece of evidence to
What
talk about
evidence
this?
are you talking about?
Nordhaus 22. This guy's from the Breakthrough Institute. This organization lobbied for billions in oil, like large corporate companies.
So
What
what's your
makes him a
question?
credible author to speak on the sustainability of capitalism?
Well, I don't even think if it is biased or not. He's citing empirics and talking about how climate.
Empirics, so how has climate change gotten better?
Yeah, he talks about how this deaths from climate change has decreased by factors of 225, and it also talks about
Factors of 25, what
Yeah.
factor? Does it account for global south?
It
wars?
also talks about resiliency, that there's been a lot of correlations with growing wealth and also as
Okay.
well as falling
Growth
rates of.
and wealth. What about socialism?
Jimmy, I
Is
can't
that-
answer your questions if you're not willing to
Okay,
finish.
thank you. That's fine. Let's go to the competition argument. Non-mutually exclusive parts, all being functionally less than the plan. What alternatives are allowed under your interpretation?
Permutations that are able to test whether the alternative is competitive or not.
Okay, that's fine.
Like we don't justify like severing out of the things. The plan, they just can't sever out of the plan. Like the
Okay,
plan has to be done.
yeah, I think that's good. Advantage counterplan, why would companies not comply to finalize guidance documents?
One, because it's like, what do you mean, like private companies?
Yeah,
Like one, it's not in their best interest. We can make arguments about how it's too costly for them, which means that they're not able to afford that. And two is that it's never been done in before, so it makes people uncertain whether or not their standards are going to be protected or not, which decreases the amount of
Okay.
innovation.
so if parties feel uncertain, that means they innovate less and spend less, presumably, right?
What they innovate less, and especially now that you're not even sending them through the courts, which one means you can't solve Advantage 2, but two also means that they don't know if their standards are actually going to
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I would like, so ADR, what were your terms? I caught, do you both do the counterplan other issues? Were there anything else?
counterplan in the plan, I guess.
Counterplan, then plan, so
But also plan in the counterplan probably is also.
okay, so sequencing, okay, that's fine. Reasons to reject?
Condo, competition, private actor fee. I think there's a bunch of other ones.
Yeah, that's fine. We got it. 942. Okay, I can give an order in the meantime. It's the cap K, the waivers counter plan, advantage 1, advantage 2. Okay. Sorry? Oh, yeah, cap K, waivers counter plan, advantage 1, advantage 2. Everyone good? Okay. Capitalism unleashes intertwined risks to all existential. 1, climate warming, pollution, and biodiversity collapse, compounded to non-linear threshold. 2, war, peace, incest, and militarism that guarantees escalation is the root cause of global warfare, disease arises from austere healthcare systems, and lack of regulation turns the case for future tech innovation on chemical bio, and super weapons causes cascading system failure, culminating in extinction. That's the durable evidence. 2, C1 is framework by the Afghan links to the plan's philosophical investments in capitalism and a solvent alternative for responsibility. They choose CF's ideological leanings and should defend them. Anything else endorses blatant research and living the only valid debate. 2, arbitrariness, their interludes, all but 8 seconds of the 1 AC, unpredictably shifting the focus of debate in the 2 AC. The 3rd, pick and choose rooted in industrial capitalism. Hyper-expansion must center informational capitalism. Zuckerville 17, specific represents the whole picture. What does scholar change? I can lot of those who focus on carbon discuss carbon expansion authors occupant with the patents made markets authors interest in trademark for the dispatch message in relation with the society of capitalism is a time where could be understood area of industrial capitalism now constitution of longer supporting protagonists. 4th, no offense, they get to weigh the F and we only get caps links and have a link to the plan. 5, structural analysis only validating philosophical investments allows debates over broad systems and values, which is more educational than hamstrung. Politics is said that Jews said fairness in class, so you should try to strike the balance between the two and only we're better for critical class. 6, next TOC is unlimited trademark apps are infinite with 0 built-in groundly speaking personal aspect break new creative links are key to KPS and game fairness is not an impact, it's just an internal link. Now they fill in is worse, they cause things like process counterplans and picks that are more unfair. Now if they say perm with it's nonsense. 1, mutually exclusive, the all abolishes IP suffering any reasonable definition of strengthened IP protection. Should is mandatory color. 32, should shall mean capacity to express obligation necessary judicial shopping has a duty equivalent to compulsion. The mere existence of IP is incompatible with the all. Andrews 19. Legal liberalism and certain cultural legitimacy of the property campaigns are a larger ideological second led by capitalism investment constructing cultural property with the material property essential to not only protect and extend the verified cultural property. The ultimate goal is to also interact with the market legal and property by determining culture such as the individuals respond to functional judgment of the market as the force of nature which defenders rely on legal legitimacy of the cultural property the cultural styles and physical understanding of the market communication the market is everything is a price, especially cultural property covered by patent properties and trademarks subject to leveraging facility and offshore protecting commodity chains made into arbitrary taxation that makes this a hegemonic model of globalization possible and profitable. 2, links of just each one lowers perm solvency. 3rd, framework it excludes the perm. Now they say growth is sustainable. There are actually no double blind. 1, materially answers to proof of disaster exclusivity. 2, ideologically it's incoherent for a fiat at all to overcome their explicit endorsement of capitalist logic, which are legitimate grounds for contestation. Now they say growth is sustainable. For 1, the right evidence isn't predictive. Past trends being wrong doesn't indict newer trends that have academic rigor. 2, decides McAfee. Insert for reference. McAfee is horrible. 1, calculation only counts domestic consumption. That's bad. Hegel 20. McAfee. Dating the line is not simple for every year. Ignores a critical reason plus not include research involved in extracting producing transporting likely growth is an artifact of global state manufacturing and cannot be used to make claims about dematerialization needs to be first tax share of use derived from production it does not materialism. No green growth. Now they say the Nordhaus evidence is from a lobbyist group, i.e. the Breakthrough Institute that was seriously cross-sectioned lobbied for billions in oil on behalf of large oil. Also does not say that growth is key to any of the risks or that risk is existential. We get new answers when the winner makes them. They say no link. 2 links out of the 1 and C draw 1 corporatization IP expansion funnels billions into pockets of capitalist overlords and structurally stunts proletariat innovation and creativity. 2, mystification. The economic regime naturalizes expansion of corporate ownership into every facet of our lives, constraining public imagination, obscuring the need for radical alternatives to sustainable growth. Turns the case of the alt cells. The first is I-law. The warrant is a need for international cooperation. That's 1 training. The growth imperative inherently overcodes American decision making, which deprives compliance is favorable to survival of the fittest. Durber 20, the results in balance. Durber 20, the climate work that's in data economic system of derived from profits including resources which is by independence is an extra extinction. At least construction of a regime. Mark a regime that was also the Durber evidence from The 1 and C. Now, second is globalization. Growth enables Trumpist belligerents, making collapse inevitable. That'll be on the case. Third is biotech. They've literally highlighted the status quo, unsustainable trends, log in collapse. And capitalism stifles innovation. B20, innovation, dependent on creative labor, inequalities, make autocracy. And by the working class, approach by necessity, influence, massive potential creativity, workers are freedom, ability to waste on non-linear, experiment, failed capitalism, dictates a lost factory product, beginning precarious position, religious security, securities, and values, fighting for money on project corporate structure, and the risk trafficking of fiduciary duty to profits. Fourth is disease growth, ensures that it's inevitable, which is evidence from the 1 and C. Now, they say in epistemic and private actor fiat, we get to fiat anti-capitalist mindsets. One, and by private actor, one arbitrary, no bright line means it's possible to meet a definition shrinks to include all neg fiat, and the government is composed of private actors. Second, reciprocal, the plan is also epistemic. Third, no link, all is an epistemic fiat. There's huge latent momentum now, polls and protests confirms widespread anti-capitalist sentiments. That's a durable evidence, so you can judge the alt forward neck around their limit. Their interval limit takes and uniquest counterplans. 5, they win theory to kick the alt and treat it like it just said. That also answers utopian fiat, and non-res theory is bad. It's arbitrary. Now, the alt unites the global front against capitalism. BLM strikes climate disaster and market instability, produce widespread anti-capitalist sentiments. The alt provides an organizational framework and ideological direction for revolutionaries to take over and tear capitalism apart at the seams. It solves the whole aff. All the terminals in ILA or rogue AI, biotech, etc. are all developed because of profit motive. Globalization collapses, climate change, and prolif both are caused by profit and biosphere collapse. The alt solves it because it removes capitalism, which is the root cause. Now, they say protection is global. The seismic shock of domestic revolution would unite the proletariat globally. If I could predict the revolution first, carry out political revolution would have to be an international convention not by the the present terrible revolution will influence countries to as a revolution would send the shockers throughout the world that shake away the billions of dollars trying to no alternative as possible would contribute to urbanization on a global scale. Now, they say the alt seeks authoritarian takeover. It involves grassroots movements that rise from ashes to support the global governmental efforts. Suisi Halbert is highlighted to nothing and does not say climate change. It also assumes ego-socialist degrowth transitions, which is not the alt. No transition wars. The one of the alt incorporates the very people that have potential to cause the revolution. Second, no impact. Hard zero says they go nuclear. Capitalist extinction outweighs. Third, transition wars on team capitalist power, which is Gerber on the overview. Now, they say perm do the alts or whatever this was. It was incoherent and I couldn't really float, but it looks like do both or it's ever the plan, which is bad. Perm do both was answered. Above, alts must be functionally less than the plan we meet. The alt does not do the plan. Abolishing all other instances. Severance strengthening to make stronger. This Merriam-Webster no date, which means that the perm is functional severance. Now, they say any ideological remainder impedes. That was answered on the double blind above, and functions that don't ban the alt bans the plan. So, yeah, obviously makes no sense. The waiver's counterclaimed. Concede the permits, assess the competition, reject the argument, not the team, no solvency advocate doesn't apply to anything else because we have solvency advocates, but no one knows what the solvency advocates are not team, and now condo, one flexible counterplans are key. IPR, or we get what we did. IPR protection is level, so requiring multifaceted testing. Second, logic, condo is an unpredictable, non-resolution rule that denies and negates the status quo. Third, innovation, followed by testing, encouraging new extreme research. Fourth, info processing, hard one C's. Fourth, to sufficiency, and best answer, fostering critical thinking. Defense, 1, DMU, adding more advocacy, speech and value until there's particular liability. Second, skew inevitable, T decides in speech. Reject dispo, 1, definitional consensus, there's none. 2, force perms, toss the world peaceful flanks. Third, cancel flex into C. Dictates the block. Dispo, tunes, and counterplans evade their offense against the logical force of judge. To vote for a world worse than the status quo, and condo multiplies all our offense. It makes it impossible to go for any other argument in the 2 and R. The standards advantage. Spillover 0, government SEOs aren't key to standards. They've got one card on this and it's horrendous. It just says that they're an important part which isn't reverse causal at all. So, and the government standards are inevitable because SEOs are private organizations. Though allow impact, one is that countries turning inwards at a rapid rate undermines Trump and other conservative populists. Backlash to globalization, ensuring collapse the after doesn't overwhelm or solve the largest political shift in history. Second, it solve nothing. This is the 2 gridlock. As countries fight and refuse each other, bilateralism and regional agreements solve their impacts and exist outside of the BLA. That's speculatively preferred. It's the US have none of the cards account for structural causes ensuring system failure. The internal link is laughable. It describes certain aspects of trade that SEOs help, but is not even close to saying that SEOs are the linchpin of international trade. Highlight one line in the 20-year Tweezy evidence that says that standards would stop globalization from collapsing and that overcomes all causes. ILAW is also totally distinct. Now, SEO survived this woe. All BVN's cards are industry hacks. Brown is an IP authority representing SEO organization writing an amicus brief. It has a clear incentive to inflate the threat. Our goes a step further and says the courts have decided, after weighing the evidence, that standards can thrive without the plan. Griffin is the senior vice president of the American National Standards Institute. I'm good for cross-sex. Yeah.
I want to start a little bit about the link. How is you articulated the biotech link? Could you explain that? Like, I don't know. That seems like more like a turns case argument for the alt.
Yeah, it's a turns case argument.
So it's not a link.
I guess not, but it's a reason the alt
So I
doesn't
guess
have
what link do you have? Like attempting to solve for globalization? Like.
No, there were multiple link arguments that I made. The first was the corporatization argument. IP expansion allows for the funneling of money into elites and large corporations, which we think uphold capitalism. The second one is that IP naturalizes the idea of property ownership and private ownership and corporate ownership
why is
into
private
facets of our
ownership
lives. What?
Why is private ownership bad?
Because it cements property logics, which we think are bad, and
Why?
uphold capitalism. Because those are, the idea of private property is what upholds the kind of competitive mindset of capitalism that results in people doing things for profit as opposed to social good.
But that's not really what your quote says, but that's fine. I want to talk a little bit about the alternative itself. So your argument is just that global movements in the U.S. would be able to spill over internationally. Do you have any evidence about adversaries? You made arguments on the case page on how China never wants to comply with anything that the U.S. is doing. Do you have any evidence that says that those actors would comply with these grassroots movements?
I mean, first of all, we don't think actors like China would comply with the plan either, because obviously, the U.S. has antagonized them. But
not the plan.
yeah, the Avakian evidence says that movements have global connections, and the interconnectedness of economies would ensure that a successful U.S. revolution would send, quote, shockwaves
This is
throughout
talking
the world.
about countries in the global south that the U.S. has historically been very interconnected with. That's a quote from your evidence.
I don't think
How,
so.
I mean, do you want me to read the evidence back at you right now? It says that it would have a heavy influence on what's happening in countries in the south, and which the U.S. has historically been closely interconnected with. How
US
are
is
you able to
closely-
resolve other countries like China?
The U.S. is closely interconnected with a lot of countries,
But,
including
I'm
China.
saying
A large
larger
portion of
adversaries
China,
like
the
Russia
Chinese.
and China, who are the ones who are going to try and overtake the U.S. and cause for the impact of transition wars. How do you solve for those?
Again, the U.S. is interconnected with those countries.
Or if you're do you think the U.S. is interconnected and close friends with China?
They're not close friends, but they trade a ton with China. China's
Do we
economy
really trade a
relies-
ton with China? Trump just literally put a bunch of tariffs to stop us from trading with China.
I mean, yeah, he did put some tariffs, but that doesn't
Some
mean
tariffs.
that doesn't
He
mean that
literally
all
says he
companies
never
are
wants
going
to trade
to
with
leave
them. They're
China.
ripping us off.
It's still a lot cheaper to manufacture in China than it is in the U.S.
Okay,
So
sure.
companies are going to stay there. Interconnectedness is still relatively high right
Sure.
now.
That's fine. On the framework itself, how is the judge able to determine whether our philosophical investments in this capitalism is applicable to all capitalism as a whole?
Well, I'm confused about your question. If we win that the AF's logics invest into capitalism, then you determine the AF is capitalist.
So it's you link the curve.
Alright, yeah. Strongly advantage two at the top. Advantage two at the top, and then I'll get the rest of the order.
What's the rest of the order?
Yeah. When y'all have it, or I can do it now. It's the sponte DA, waivers, counterplan, vanish counterplan, arbitration.
Wait, what's the order?
After
So it's advantage 2, sua sponte, and then
waivers.
waivers was already kicked into it.
Oh.
So advantage
Or no,
counterplan.
you didn't kick it actually.
I did, but that's fine. Advantage counterplan and arbitration.
Yeah.
Arbitration at the end.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me
ADR arbitration.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
Wait, Jim, third.
Yeah. Good.
yes.
Panel? Alright. Event? Okay.
Trump zeroes the case and ramps up anti-competitive practices, wrecks the science industry, we have asset, government private sector costs, wrecks the CDC, which needs science policy, Trump also wrecks infrastructure costs, COVID, strategies for CDC, can't track new diseases, overall policy, so can't regardless of the asphalt tree, can't change it, not try or die. So the other impact decided was not extended, Trump is ineffective, which he said they cannot solve no new answers, no disease, the to solve when it crosses things like vaccine and vendors interruptedly the key, those are governed by patents. The plan only affects copyright, drop global, all causes means they can't solve disease, benefits are not access to the most lethal, article most globally transmissible, the deadlier of diseases, the user is contained and the quicker it burns out this murder. Wait, their app says that it's 0.016% inserted. So just Monday. No straight turn, concede, thought person, all you need, you don't get the impact, you social laundry list, non-rest theory, concede that's bad for arbitrariness. Waivers, concede the permutation, test of competition. Advantage counterback, concede all deficits. We're going to space. Chaotic, dissat. Try or die. Extinction in order will drop the impact if you see on the rod before competition. Then it's destroy, still fair. Counterback, fiat, billion stars. Cross effects, space skull, which solves its TARDIS. Strike all new 1 ARs. Hit the impact kick. Every flank is set. Reverse guidance. New text here. Each time a party doesn't comply, billions is funded. Conceded deficit means all parties don't comply. 2C1, do both links to that benefit. Includes that street changes law that stirs up controversy. 2C2, do counterback severance as a mandate. Extended law will protect IBR. Simply fiat for 11 parties. Competition should solely be based on mandate. Anything else limits all ground by allowing the butterfly effect to clear all counterback should means government from CIP. That's because 15 the world should some directed one must be directed by me and send a practical sequence better else and of course would whether should return that the effect will improve contractual loss. IBR is currently law contribute by international parties to the rest. The one effective according to national laws resolve is by law that's worse. Every 64 resolve is act depending on law. US video guidance not binding last force law. Go to 13 according to US video. Last expense use money rules that carry the force law and we presumably running with the US video and our courts before one ground. This topic requires process counterbalance to equal playing field. Any dissent that might exist or generic and teams break new every round making it possible if it's not a counterbalance and app delay recognize commission. God go full on every consult counterbalance becomes an app. Other than the topic here striking any dissent frames to the balance of ground. Apps are common deficits counterbalance can be offshore is potential, but we can't cut dissent so laundry list. Affirmative no app offense you could just turn to that benefit and unabused the counterbalance solution on theory, particularly we're only with the evidence to IB policy, other issues framing issue, no text sense, so cannot be legitimate, but it's still legitimate because stats function, 2 ground, no 1 ground, internal net is raised, so the only way to do offense on this topic, 2 from gaming text is shuffle to add unpredictable functions to USA, worse than the bench counter, 3 out of stats, 3 arbitrariness, the rest is USF show, no need to base over function, diversion, erosion, ground next, the next ability, engage adjustment, arbitrarily limit out every other position, but they don't get it, depth is that only 5 crowd, 3, fantasy cost their society hand, registry that, not taking the brace, I think 2, many researchers are important, the biggest thing for the only way they option defense, all the use to also give the chamber record, I'm sure to be that lower something interesting, but the balance of what copy China Japan, it's all veteran deficit, Spanish, San Francisco. They didn't send out text, so no new 1 AR, check email time if they send a new one, no impact, we can print money, that's why 16 times, and see research copy, or return the deficit is not sustainable, the desk, level of the debt, econ, trouble, have this across the midst of the use again, print money is still maintaining high credit rating, it's also from 21, so thumb for 4 years, compared to counterparts with the same age, not good, 1 neck S, cross apply from condo to arbitrary defaults into no neck fiat, which was on the other page, 3 reasonability, conceived from topicality, arbitration. City costs that way, 3 defensive top, it's over, just between MX city crashes, energy does not affect the cross borders, cost migration crisis, rush food security, all pathways to nuclear escalation and disease prevention, which independently causes cities that trade turns case no cities. Its governments cannot enforce policies to negative consumption to EC1, but do both sales, run litigation. The inclusion plan requires adjudication in courts that nullifies the cannabis mandatory arbitration provision. It's just never used as a spell or war. If both are used, companies would default to litigation because it's not a sufficient tradition. Do both also makes no sense. Even when the firm do the covenant, you can't be out. Well, 2, the covenant explicitly advanced the plan. It's do both. It's incoherent. 2AC2 firm do the covenant severs. Covenant doesn't mandate the plan cross by. From the other page 1, it refers to the U.S. possessive right here. They run into the agreement on any applies to each individual. Also, never distinct from others. Cross by Mandel means they have to fiat, not merely make it a possibility. USFG's free branches to solicitate USA. Free branches to all parents on the federal government are reserved to the states. Even if they do this, competition should be the most likely implementation of the plan, which includes enforcement. The AA is both private and international AA. The AA is private international body, arbitration is private. That's very clear. Accordingly, arbitration are private. Prefer for limits allowing us to fiat private international forces. Last number 2 mechanism for getting just that. No secrecy firm. 1 textually as the words then. 2 as the element for secrecy, neither implied in the covenant. Even if either study that's functionally intrinsic. 3 deletes all dissats crossed by sure means to the plan after every DA lists all ground. 2 purpose illegitimate because it has function crossed by from the other page, and it's also textual topicality. It allows infinite asks that are functionally intrinsic, which is bad. It's also incoherent. You can't mandate arbitration, and only disputes also fails because it looks like do both. Counterpart solves or straight turning certainty gaps in the plan. Crash certainly only counterpart solves currently change slow. Separate from the video, must be predicted just still decrease cover 3. Now the plan diverse innovation and various business and R10. It's massive litigation culture, discussion and coordination with all the courts starts to do more sense. The economy suffers like a low cost volume to country on business well. The coverage spent for R&D judges quit that 0.24 by 24. There's evidence to take to launch initiative rigors, which comes around awareness, terrorists, the culture to guide this observation, which can serve for long-term health and vitality of courts that new solvency because parties won't perceive it. SCPs are not high culture human. 14 quarters courts for arbitration. Result of the SCP doesn't there's the rights of parties distributors that were arbitration. Now it's also solves for entry results in the same innovation as has dispute adjudication. The evidence concludes next infringement is because of lack of standards, which is how clarity solves in terms of offense. You all have sentences.
Okay.
that all time?
Yeah.
Are there cards?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess so.
Okay, well I'm on saving those. It's gonna be advantage 1, advantage 2, the advantage counter plan, the process counter plan, the kickback.
Advantage count plan, ADR count.
Yeah.
Just put a good part to the doc, just so that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sending it out. I just put them in a doc because it's. Give me a second to organize my clothes.
It's just a non-stop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just my doc.
Alright, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a sec.
You guys are good?
Not yet.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you.
Jimmy, you're good? Hannah, you guys good? It is try or die for winners to regard as international trade and international standards. Since you want groups that just spill over, no, but Parks Evidence talks about how yes, spill over because international standard organizations rely on U.S. standards to model, and Runoffs calls it yes, the shady evidence talks about how trades are international standards are key to solve our international trading cooperation. SEO is inevitable. No, they're not inevitable because of SEO. There's no revenue. Trump backlash. No, Trump stopped the tariffs. Screw that. There won't be any backlash. Gridlock and violent results. No, there's what? Oh, and the Supreme Court checks Trump's tariffs because because it's a brink argument about like why the access is necessary. And gridlock, no, because there's no bilateral trade agreements without standards, and no internal link is wrong because yes, the NFPA talks about how there are key rules and certainty within trade, which escalates to all of trade and causes spillover. And ILS is saying no. The governmental standards are key. That's the pork evidence I already cited. ILS is saying no because it's international cooperation, which again is the shady evidence, and evidence are wrong because all their evidence indicts are about the OEC in China. ILO fails as again that part's about the OEC in China, and advantage 2 all concede all the defense besides pandemics. They drop the part of the bomb evidence and talks about how knock-on effects are what caused the extinction. 0.66 doesn't matter because it's the knock-on effects that cause the extinction of pandemics. Go to the advantage counter plan. What does it solve the app because they don't allow for standards to be incorporated? And we get to spec the combo in the 1AR is only the perm do any combo of the planks in the 1AR that's only allowed to be able to back against the block and the 1AC spamming planks that allows for choice to get the app back in the game, and the new plan text would have looked like this. A model said other planks will spec that solves the terminal to the attack because the space call other theories unflowable, so we get new answers because we didn't catch the ticky-tacky stuff. But app offense definitely outweighs because of the block, and all the space call stuff will do the perm here, and so the picks include that even though it's perfectly theoretic system cannot replace function of decentralized innovation that destroys investor confidence. Con 20 for president transformation into do you want me to get the card?
Yeah.
Mark it as an analytic. Go to ADR. Okay, go to ADR. They drop the deficit cross-X, which means that they cannot use this mode of IP, which makes them less likely to want to go,
They won't want to innovate because
they won't want to innovate because they don't have the system IP, which means that they can't solve any of advantage 1. And also it costs these companies way too much, which means that they won't be able to fund all this stuff because again it costs too much, which means they won't be able to invest. And there's
they'll rule on wrong cases.
oh yeah, and they'll rule on the wrong cases,
They
which
don't want to spend money to hire experts.
because they don't want to spend money to hire experts and judges. And there's no impact to mega cities. The Pico evidence talks about how A, they're inevitable, and B, there's no existential because it doesn't break the cycle. It breaks the cycle of urbanization, and it's not a linear effect, which means you actually can't predict the existential downfall of mega cities. And Homer issues definitely solves. Extending the other issues, no deficits to doing it over IP solves. No server because it's plan plus and per VDF, and extend the competition counterplays must compute textually and functionally preferred objectivity words like clear meaning, functionally or distinguishable and undefinable obfuscating predictability. Picture top academy strong competition is different from T because it's fiat version only. They say net guard F guard always permitting functional only counterplay justify the solution makes out of pretension. IP or rights that the game for the net console delay commissions are impossible to defeat. Infinite interest regulatory max regen spillover ban counterplays cap all checks snowballing is wrong. We're limited to either testing or text or functional part and from giving not or inter absence can delete not scramble random text with all the pages of word games so it's good to key legal education and Roman text and function solves. And you want me to go to cap? Okay, go to the cap. Okay, go back up to the counterplane, and there's no spillover to clog with established shock and control works under 20. Open invocates and overload, like an empirical support, predicated dually. However, the evidence is not yet to emerge from rules and civil procedures system. The type doctrines consider resource decision, claim provision, completion, absentation, journalism, and compartmentalization. Go to cap. Extend our framework that they get to weigh the theater petition pen against a competitive alternative and philosophical competition as well. Most would be functionally less than the planet beneficial to planes and inclusion and impeding preferred. They also have investments in cap on the other fellow competing philosophies of vague, indeterminate, eliminates, and eliminates value fixed plan plus all capitalism, communism exists on a spectrum, not hard ideological life, interpretation based on purpose and offensive defense, as good perfect solutions for myopic and real activist issues. Mad and also anti-cap resistance is wrong. In turn, they feel it never becomes anti-capitalist same when they're any planning at all. And
Actually, go back. Responsibilities.
Responsibilities.
We've identified that some terms of IP are capitalist.
We've identified that some terms of IP are capitalist.
But not all of them.
But not all of them.
So that solves for acknowledgement.
So that's also
But the
acknowledgement.
permutation do the plan.
But
permutation do the plan.
but perm do the plan and all functions that do not ban the plan solved
Was dropped.
and was dropped.
And their only answers to it was that it bans the plan.
Their only answer to it is
But
that
they
it
dropped
bans
the
the
argument
plan.
that it bans all other IP.
But they dropped the argument that it bans all other
And except for the
except for the
bans
parts of the deal that didn't plan. Can we go up to
no, go back. Yeah, go back up to framework.
okay, yeah, go back up to framework. Philosophical competition is wrong. Turn the theater, everything anti-capitals, everything that material. Challenges us with length of plan and predictability. Capital control is a non-starter. It's not cap good or bad. It's in a resolution, so it shouldn't be the starting point of our opportunity to universalize that every other different idea. And functional limits all for neck flex. Things like the taxes counterplan, process counterplans, process counterplans that are too GDB get beat on competition. First and last speech given. Fairness is an impact. Because debate's a game. They rely on fairness as well. They assume want you to adjudicate it fairly. But anyways, you link use is arbitrary. And the link is wrong. Oh, yeah, the link is wrong. A, because the Rummer evidence in the 1AC talks about how the government pays for everybody to have access to these standards, meaning that they don't block out anyone because the government pays and allows for public access. And second, their argument is about IP broadly, not contextualized to the affirmative, which means other framework. But even if the alt fails to easily transition towards socialism, and China won't want to cooperate in the alt.
Oh, we have 6. Wait, how long? 6:21. Yeah.
It's the cap K, the advantage counterplan, the ADR counterplan, advantage 1, advantage 2. Okay. Okay. Panel. So we're good. Offense, defense, filters, impact, how the 2AC on deficit plus perm is impossible because they dropped the ball on substance. The one error has not uttered a word on alt solves the case and link turns the case, which means that any chance that the GAF derails the revolution means that our offense automatically outweighs. This means the GAF is actively harmful for the innovation they create, and only socialism can solve. The only coherent deficit was an analytic without a warrant and not contextualized, so the 2 error does not get new answers, and any new warrants on copyright key are new, so auto strike them. Several impacts were conceded and outweigh. First, climate change, warming, pollution, and biodiversity collapse all tip nonlinear thresholds, which causes extinction, means it's try or die. Second, drop that capitalism breeds incessant militarism, which guarantees escalation and is the root cause of global war. This turns the terminal to trade and global cooperation. Countries have no incentive to cooperate on issues if they're motivated by greed, which is the 1C Durber evidence consistently conceded throughout this debate. Third, disease arises from austere healthcare systems and lax regulations turns their disease impact because they don't solve global actors and private abuses while we can, which infers try or die. Also, drop that the profit motive ruins innovation. The 2C evidence is great. It says that IP allows big companies to block workers through patents, and fear of losing jobs causes workers to not want to take risk and therefore not want to experiment to create new biotech. That also decreases research and development because they dropped austerity measures from the government caused insufficient research. That's the B evidence, which is totally uncontested by the one error. It's an independent dissent to the case because we have straight turned the disease scenario. Now, they also conceded future tech innovation on chemical bio and cyber weapons will cause cascading system failure, independently causing extinction. That's the Durber evidence. Now, the permit. Now, framework is irrelevant. We will win that the alt is functionally competitive. The one error dropped the ball on the perm. Perm do the plan and all functions that don't do the plan is exactly the same as perm and non-mutually exclusive plans, which was definitely answered in the 2C. It was also not dropped. I explicitly said that this looks like do both, so we get to cross-apply deficits to it. Our evidence specific to the mere inclusion of IP and why it's bad. For do both, or the perm is a non-starter. One no net benefit. The one error drops sustainability, which means that the impacts that they go for are inevitable in the long run. Now, there is no push on proximate or short-term risk because they drop. They all solve the case. They also drop the definition of strengthened from the 2C. That strengthened must include the permanence and must include permanence, which means that the perm severs the plan and protection of IP on net, which is entirely dropped in the one error, and independently reason to reject it because it's not functionally, or the alt is both functionally and textually competitive. The alt can't overcome the AF itself. The one error mishandles the link. I'm not going for Phil Comp because the existence of any IP derails the anti-capitalist transition. Frame it through the concession that IP is inherently a concept of capitalism because it assumes the private property is the basis of society. That uniquely cements market logics in society, which was dropped. Any risk it's a continuation takes away from radical energy means you shouldn't risk an increased chance of extinction by voting out. First, market naturalization. Large corporations use the existence of IP to convince people that market logics are natural and an inevitable part of life. The fact that the plan is a carve-out in the communist society is exactly what signals to people that they need markets no matter what. The impact is that it takes out revolutionary energy. People lose motivation to revolt because they think that avoiding the market is inevitable. Second is the lead advantage. The existence of IP lets elites offshore production to exploit the proletariat, use financial arbitrage and tax havens, which makes globalization possible and profitable. Or it gets rid of the AF and severs durable fiat, which was below. They also drop link turns the case. The growth imperative overcodes American decision making, which inherently deprioritizes compliance in favor of survival of the fittest, ensuring that they never comply with international law post-plan. Now the Bremer evidence, they say the government allows access to everyone wrong. They create the capitalist profit motive proven on the biotech scenario, but IP broadly is bad. Any inclusion of IP is bad, which was above. Now they say transition wars. There was zero warrant. They just said the words, so don't give the two or anything new, but drop that they all incorporate the very people that have the potential to quash the revolution. Card zero says they go nuclear, and transition wars are inevitable between capitalist powers, which is Durber evidence above. They say China. They literally said the words China. You cannot give the 2AR any new posturing on this, but you drop global spillover, seismic shock of the domestic revolution unites the proletariat, which causes interconnectedness, and economies shift over as the U.S. reduces its massive trade. Also drop that movements have connections in other countries. As they gain more power in the U.S., they'll be able to fund movements in other countries as they get more powerful. At worst, judge kick the alt, they conceded momentum is now, which is the Peterson evidence. Movements like BLM are uniting to take over capitalism, which is a conceded movement to set to the plan. Even if the alt doesn't spill over globally, it still solves domestically, which is sufficient to solve the case, and any risk of global spillover means if you vote neg, any inclusion that the plan is worse as an auto neg ballot. Now the Alt Unites Global Front against capitalism, drop movements like BLM strike, climate disaster, and market instability, and produce widespread anti-capitalist system. The Alt unites those movements and increases their scope and intensity. It solves the case. Drop, then it solves international law. The terminals to that were not extended in the 1AR, so don't give them to the 2AR, but they're all about rogue AI, biotech, etc. They've dropped, those are all developed because people are trying to make money. It also solves globalization collapse. The terminal to that is climate change and prolif, which we've obviously straight turned above. Now, the global spillover stuff was done above.
Also solves biosphere.
Yeah, it also solves the biosphere by getting rid of the profit motive, which is a conceded argument. Now, go to advantage 1.
Wait, concede the perms on
Concede the perms on all the counterplans. They're just a test of competition, rejecting the argument off the team. We have a solvency applicant on our counterplan. There were no new answers that they get. Yeah, they conceded the alt solves case. It removes the need for globalization. Their evidence assumes, okay, that's fine. We all want a card, though. Maybe pick up.
The order is going to be the advantage, then
which advantage?
Huh?
Just standards, right?
what?
Standards.
Yeah, the standards advantage. Then the ADR counterplan, and then the is anybody not ready?
Trade collapse significantly outweighs and is not turned by anything on the alt with the cap critique. Now, there's a couple of framing issues that even if we were not making all the sustainability warrants directly on the critique itself, we are making those warrants on the case page. Why profit motive is good for innovation, why it is good for trade, and I'll resend those here right now. Now, Trump's tariffs provide uniqueness for the app. Collapse is coming fast, and now think about it. Trump just imposed tariffs on China, and we saw that our GDP was decreasing rapidly, but the Supreme Court would be able to check future instances of unsustainability of trade, which implicitly answers our argument about how trade collapse will be inevitable, but does not matter because all actions that are bad, driven by profit motive and bad capitalism, will be checked back by the Supreme Court. Drop warrant that was in the 1AR and not in the 2AR, which means it's a logical extension, and there's no reason why you should strike it off. Even if it sounds a little bit new, the 2AR is granted some extrapolation because 1AR is time press. Was trying to answer in minutes of the blocks, and that was an argument that was made on another flow that says that the block is really big, which gives the negative unfair advantage, and the app should be able to give new extrapolations in order to come back to fight for it in the debate. That justifies any arguments that they're going to attempt to flag as new. Now, trade collapse outweighs other countries. Most countries' GDPs are reliant on trade themselves. When they collapse, then other countries turn to two diversionary wars, and this leads to war collapse, not just ecological collapse, but nuclear war itself. Now, they have no defense to this impact, which means it's try or die for the app to solve it, and as long as there's any risk that the permutation is able to solve the impacts to the impact to the cap cake, then you should err affirmative because the permutation is able to solve, as well as we have an impact that the app is attempting to solve that is going to come now and fast. Now, I'm going to do I'm going to do the counterplan debate here. Now, first, they dropped that counterplans must compete off text and function comparatively. Now, this was flagged in the 2AC as a reason to reject the team. Ask yourself, where was non-res theory in the 2NR? There was none, so you have to strike that off your flow. Counterplans must compete off text and function, prefer for objectivity. Words have clear meanings, and functions are indistinguishable enough, and they say afground, but afground outweighs. They drop how they kill us, and this causes in-ground violence because 2ACs now have to answer a bunch of other stuff. They talk about how it's unfair, and then there's other things as well. Now, they also conceded how it's arbitrary for them to say that in the first place, about also how they kill the logics of debate, because debate is not a policy analysis game, but debates over semantics are more real world, and voting for introducing non-germane and voting for counterplans is illogical. Now, I don't understand, I don't care if this might sound a little bit sus because it does not have any super good warrants on why rejecting the team is key, but reject the argument on the team was one, new, and two, was said on the advantage counterplane, not the ADR counterplane where permutation other issues was met. This is a ticky-tacky flow thing, but MBA should have been more careful when kicking out of arguments, but also it's a reason to reject the team. There's no new arguments, anything in the 2NR that was cross-applied, and the non-res theory does not apply because we've shown how it is already arbitrary and non-subserving. Now go to the CAC itself. The permutation to the
in all other instances that do not ban the plan definitely solves their default answers do not apply for a couple of reasons. Second, first is that the mutual exclusion. Ask yourself all of the impacts that they have isolated or with things why patents are bad or why other forms of intellectual property are bad. If they have not tied you a specific link to why copyright protections are bad, that means that abolishing in all other instances is able to solve for their impact, which one prevents the impacts from turning the case in the first place because the impacts are capped with the permutation being able to solve, that we never see them calling to impact and turning the trade because we stabilize it through the alternative. But second is that copyright in the instance of the app is a good idea. They dropped a couple of reasons why. First, the primary allows for SEO to be financed to everyone, which means financialization impacts do not matter because companies do not care about giving it how high the cost would be because the government would just pay, which means everybody has access to it in the first place. The links are literally zero. Think about it. They're all IP broadly. They say that we drop arguments on why any mere inclusion is bad, but that's wrong. That goes back to our framework interpretation, which is that goes back to our framework interpretation, and that's why this is important. Just because it's existing with their other forms are bad, it does not matter because philosophical competition and also saying that other instances are bad and you should hold it to us is also not true, which applies technically to philosophical competition. Our framework interpretation is that you should weigh the competing policy options, extending the link you lose. They're saying that IP in one instance is bad, not the alternative is bad. They said it would be able to co-opt the movement, but this is also not true because when they think about it, if the alternative is able to overcome everything that they've said, then obviously they'll be able to overcome the app as well, and if they don't, that means it fails inevitably, but the app's definitely a net benefit. They dropped how it's vague, and nobody has a thing for value systems, and because their deficits to the permutation do both are about how we also invest in socialism, in other forms of IP, which is bad for capitalism, but we, have said that's not specific to the app, and that's other instance, so the only thing it could possibly be linking to would be our philosophical investments, which they dropped framework, which means you default to ours, that's not true, and if per all instances fails. The strengthened definition does not matter because we've said that obviously we do the plan in all parts that do not ban the plan, so we're not severing strengthened. No argument about sequencing was made in the 2 NAR, so that does not matter. But also the carve out also the definition was the carve out stuff was shallow in the 2 NAR, and also it's not a tangible reason why. Obviously other countries would not follow, which that's the obvious the term matters more.
Right.
Do you want a card draw?
Vancouver doc is sent.